Okay, welcome back to the second part of our afternoon conference on the UK Veterinary Border SPS import controls coming into force and operation in its first phase on the 31st of January 2024. Now, we have already been speaking for over an hour about various aspects of these new border controls, this new veterinary border. We heard in the beginning from two port health authorities and the challenges the biosecurity challenges that exist for the UK, and also how we're going to manage these biosecurity risks and how we're going to introduce and control and enforce SPS controls at BCPs. And you heard this from Dover and you heard it from Ashford, and then we heard from Richard Ballantyne about the readiness of ports to support the government requirements to implement SPS checks from 2024, however, that being in April. So we are going to shift slightly. We heard from Rod as well on the challenges that moved us into a different territory from the ports. It moved us into trade associations and actually producers, manufacturer of food products. It also introduced the view of importers, of exporters, exporters from the EU importing into the UK, into GB. And we kind of heard what the challenges are, and we heard many questions just days before these rules come into force. So let us focus on one particular sector, a sector that always gets mentioned quite a lot, especially when it comes to controls, and that is the meat sector. And meat's very important in the UK diet. It's very essential, and we need to know what's going to happen, because today there's a lot of meat coming from the EU to the UK on a daily basis. And having heard Rod, I wonder if that is going to continue the way it does today. And the person that will answer that question so adequately right now is Peter Hartwick from the British Meat Processors Association. Obviously, importing meats from the EU, whether they be chilled or whether they be frozen or whether they be fresh, is currently without control and therefore free-for-all galore, you may think. But then that's going to change on the 31st of January. We've heard maybe with a light touch. But then certainly we're going to get controls, and then we remember the pictures Beverly showed us. So with that said, Peter, having heard what Rod said, what is the future of EU meat supplies under UK SPS controls? The floor is 100% yours.
Well, thanks, Arne. First, let me say that it's always useful to have someone go before you that basically makes all the points you were going to make. So thank you, Rod. I don't have to make them again, which is going to be efficient because we are running a bit late, and I suspect, although I'll try to be succinct, I won't take all the time that you've allocated to me, Arne. Very briefly, the British Meat Processors Association is the trade association which covers the large-scale meat processors in the UK, many of whom are active exporters and, of course, also active importers, principally from the Republic of Ireland in the case of beef, and from continental Europe, from Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and many other countries as far as pork is concerned. To put this in perspective, and why I believe government needs to be extremely careful about the potential for there to be interrupted supplies, disruptions to the supply chain because people can't sign export health certificates, delays at ports, etc., etc. The UK, very broadly speaking, about 20%, 22% of its domestic consumption of beef is imported. And that comes to around 200,000 tons, most of it coming from the European Union, and principally from the Republic of Ireland. About 80% of it comes from the Republic of Ireland. For sheep meat, believe it or not, despite the fact that we are 103% self-sufficient, some 21% of domestic consumption is imported. Most of that, of course, from New Zealand, but surprisingly, around 20% or so comes from the European Union. And for pork, the figure is dramatic. 49% of domestic consumption of pig meat is imported. That is around 780,000 tonnes, and about 95% of that comes from the European Union. Now, if you want to try and get some idea of what this looks like, if you put all of those volumes together and you estimate, I'm going to say generously, 20 tonnes per truck, it's probably a little less than that. You are talking around 50,000 truckloads per annum. It's a lot of meat, and it's a lot of meat sitting in yards for 24 hours because we can't get 4-hour pre-notification. It's a lot of paying for export health certificates for those exporting countries. It's a lot of paying custom agents and so on, millions of pounds. Karen Goodburn is on the call, will know we estimated in the first year that we started exporting, using export health certificates for export, it was costing our industry around £60 million or so. So just to give you some idea, the cost of this alone is, without any doubt, going to add to the cost of food. We've heard already about the charging that will be required at border control posts and so on. So I don't think we can any doubt that whatever other outcome the government expected to get out of this, one thing it will do is increase the cost of food. That's unavoidable, and they can say what they want, but that's what's going to happen. What I would say is this, is that our impression is actually very similar to those that I see in the chat, and that is there's a great deal of concern about veterinary capacity in member states. There is a great deal of concern about the signability of export health certificates. And Arne, you and I have both picked up on this, both in terms of directly being able to sign an export health certificate, and secondly, in terms of what we call pre-certification, what we call in the UK a support health attestation. And that is a document which comes from one supplier to another, which allows the secondary business, their vet, to sign an export health certificate. I would say one thing, however, and I suppose I'm a little surprised at some of those reactions, because we engaged with the European Commission some time ago. Somebody isn't muted.
Hang on, we're going to just get Jason to go on mute. So Jason, you're on. We're just going to get you to mute. Let me find Jason. And then there, we got him. All right, you're back on.
So I'm going to share without any of the surrounding words around it, I'm going to share a document with everybody now, which is taken directly from a letter written by a senior commission official talking about certification and pre-certification for exports to Great Britain. And it states that for pre-certification between member states for exports to Great Britain, the same approach will be taken as already agreed between the member states for all third countries in the framework of the Council Working Group, Potsdam. This would mean that pre-export certifications will only be issued when needed for certifying third country requirements going beyond the EU rules. This means that where the requirements in the certificate are covered through compliance with the EU requirements, no pre-certificate should be provided on the basis that only products in compliance with EU standards can be placed on the EU market. With regard to animal products, we understand that certificates for export to Great Britain do not contain requirements going beyond those of the EU. Now, I think it's important that, because if vets in member states are struggling to understand whether they can sign export health certificates or not, they're either confessing that their products don't meet EU standards and that countries are not complying with regionalisation policies and so on, or they misunderstand this and they need to talk to Brussels. So I would urge that people do that, because if they don't, and I suppose this is what's inevitably going to happen, there will be disruptions to supply. And that would certainly be of great deal of concern to our industry, and it would be, I think, a great deal of concern to UK government. So those of you on the call who have any influence in this area and who are talking to vets in your countries, that message needs to get across either very strongly to UK government, and that is that they've provided export health certificates which can't be signed, and or they need to speak to Brussels about whether or not it is within their capacity to sign these export health certificates. So I think that's extremely important from our point of view. Our assessment is the following, and that is that on the 31st of January, we honestly don't think there will be significant disruption. And the reason for that, at least at the UK end, because as you said, there's going to be a light touch. The question that's going to have to be asked is, will there be logjams at the EU end? And that is, in other words, if consignments do not have export health certificates, bearing in mind that as things stand, if those consignments turn up in the UK, because they don't even need to enter through a designated BCP on the 31st of January, and they won't be stopped even if that certificate's not present. The real question is, to what degree will these consignments be held up in the dispatching country? Because that's where I believe, at least from the 31st of January, the problems will occur. They will not occur, I don't believe, at the UK border on the 31st of January for all the reasons we've already discussed. So much more important to us is to understand to what degree those member states that are dispatching goods will see issues around compliance as a reason not to allow goods to be dispatched. I can't answer that question, unfortunately, because that's entirely up to each individual member state as to how they're going to handle that. But certainly that is one issue. The second issue, and I said in the chat a little earlier that I don't think there's anyone more anti-Brexit than me, but I would say, and it's a great pity there aren't some people from the Food Standards Agency and DEFRA on the call, that the UK has played a blinder on this in terms of providing flexibility and making sure that it's possible for vets to sign export health certificates. We haven't had that problem because vets have made themselves available at all times of day and night to sign export health certificates. And I guess it would be very surprising and disappointing to me to think that if an industry is important to a country like Ireland, for example, that they really can't organise themselves to provide vets at the appropriate moment to sign export health certificates. So that's extremely important. There is another issue, which is around pre-notification, and that is the second point I want to raise, which is of great importance to us. As I mentioned before, we are talking around 50,000 trucks per year, and if 24 hours pre-notification is required, there will be thousands of trucks sitting in lorry parks and in the yards of various businesses idle for 24 hours because they can't move towards the border because of the pre-notification requirement. So it's absolutely essential that as many of the BCPs as possible use the 4-hour minimum notification period as an option for highly perishable, fast-moving goods. Bear in mind that 24 hours for many fresh products, for meat, for example, could represent something like 20% of the shelf life of that product. And from a business point of view, that's simply not workable. So it's absolutely essential. And I'm not sure what the position will be for the short straits BCPs, but certainly for the ones coming across the Irish Sea, that's going to be vital to us because of the movement of beef from the Republic of Ireland. So the pre-notification easement, which in fairness, most of the BCPs are moving we're moving in the other direction towards the EU are operating to, we need to see that operating in GB. And we've certainly kept on at government, urging them to intervene here to work as closely as possible with the BCPs to get them to agree to work to the 4-hour minimum. Without that, I think there will be some significant disruptions to supply chains as well. I don't really have an awful lot more to add than that, Arne, other than my impression, indeed, is very similar to that that's been mentioned already, and that there is a great deal of concern about the level of preparation in member states in terms of capacity and, if you wish, comprehension in order to be able to sign export health certificates. And if that is the case, there will be disruptions to supply. Pragmatically, and I wouldn't wish ill on anybody, that disruption needs to happen probably so that the government wakes up and understands that there's a problem here and either reconsiders the deadlines or takes some other form of action. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much for your insights. Before I pass on, I want to maybe conclude, maybe just summarize what you've said, because it's extremely important and it hits the heart of what the current problem for January 31st is. It is the BCP, as we know, that's an issue for kind of April. What now is the matter? The three things you've mentioned. You've mentioned pre-certs. Pre-certificates that you have said are not needed from if you bring goods or if you make meats from slaughterhouses all across the EU, because it is one SPS zone.
Yes.
It is not needed. Brussels says it. Logic says it. We trust each other in the European Union. We do not need pre-certs. And if you insist on it, the likely result is going to be supply chain disruption, because as far as I heard you, and my experience tells me, not everybody can get these pre-certs for so many reasons, including because we don't know what a pre-cert actually looks like. There is, is it the model health certificate printed out and pre-cert, made a pre-cert, the full 20 pages, or is it something else, right? So I can see you're sharing the screen again.
I'm about to show you one.
All right, go for it. Go for it. So these pre-certs and experience actually shows right now, they are going
I'll show you in a second.
Business critical. But business critical. So while you're doing that, the first thing's pre-certs you mentioned. The second thing is availability of VATs. So we hear when we ask DEFRA, is everything okay in Europe? Everything's okay in Europe. No disruptions reported, no problems reported, few issues here and there, but over and large, everybody happy. And then the third is IPAFs and the 24/4 situation, where you need to contact port health authorities wherever you are located or wherever you're importing from, and restart the whole demand process to go from 24 hours to 4 hours. There's not one joined application form where you click the port health authorities that you need, you give your reasons, you submit, and then it kind of sends it to all the port health authorities. So you can repeat the whole process so many times. Does that more or less cover what you've said?
It does, yeah. So it does. So a pre-certificate, this is what a pre-certificate looks like. This is a UK pre-certificate, in this case for pig meat. And this document is not an export health certificate, and it says it's not an official document, because it isn't. A vet in an abattoir can speak to a vet in an abattoir and quite literally take his word for the fact that the goods he sent meet the requirement. Now, generally speaking, in the UK, because of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, that wouldn't be considered to be sufficient. So you need some other form of documentation. So effectively, this is a pre-certificate. We call it a support health attestation, and it is like a mini EHC. It's only 3 pages long, and it very broadly says the animals from which this meat came met EU requirements. I summarize. It's a little longer than that, but broadly speaking, that's what it does. And then it's signed at the end by a registered vet, and that accompanies the consignment to the next port of call, if you wish, the next, let's say, to the packing plant or whatever it may be. But, and this is, I guess, why I can't quite understand the pre-certification issue. Even with African swine fever in the European Union, goods are not supposed to move from a restricted zone to a non-restricted zone. So if goods from, with no disrespect to our colleagues in Bulgaria, move from Bulgaria to Germany, pig meat, by definition, as long as EU rules have been respected, it cannot have come from a restricted zone.
Yes.
So either the EU is deeply unconfident about its controls, or they don't understand. So
because otherwise it would enter in the German Food
Indeed.
supply,
The EU
market.
says if it has an oval stamp, it meets EU conditions, and therefore it can be exported in exactly the same way as German meat or French meat or Dutch meat.
Okay.
So that has to be understood. Now, I'm not particularly concerned about that. What I am concerned about is veterinary capacity and the ability to meet the requirement on a regular basis to send what is, as everybody knows, very large volumes of meat to the UK. You know, people talk about the comparison between exports from the UK to the European Union, and with no disrespect to our industry in the UK, the EU is not dependent upon supplies from the United Kingdom to maintain market balance in the European Union. The UK absolutely is dependent on the imports of meat from the European Union to maintain market balance in the United Kingdom, and without it, we will see massive price rises. So there is a great deal of importance placed on this by our industry. We believe very strongly in the important role of imports in our market. We're not at all defensive in that respect, either from the European Union or from outside. But what's essential is that moves smoothly. It is a great deal of concern to me when I've heard the discussions earlier from the port authorities. You know, that there's a risk of disruption simply because at the moment people do not have all the information they need.
Peter, thank you. We've got to move on, unfortunately, but what a fascinating time, and thank you so much for coming on. I did promise Frank that I was going to ask this question, but it's not a question that you need to answer, Peter, because if you look through the chat, Peter, though, you will see how important the issue of pre-certs is in certain parts of the world, and how this is the biggest issue now facing our continuous supply. The insistence by certain veterinarians on pre-certificates is causing significant concern. The question from Frank is, our suppliers cannot issue pre-certificates to us, so that we cannot issue the final EHC. Basically, that means trade with the UK is dead.
If it is indeed the case that you can't that you need a pre-certificate, but there's no reason why industries can't create pre-certificates. I mean, I don't think they're rocket science. All you have to do is to go on the AFA website. I'm very happy to put a link to the page in the chat here, and people can have a look at them. There's a whole list of them that we use, and there's no reason why the EU shouldn't produce a model document. Sorry, member states, individual businesses, it actually doesn't matter. As long as the receiving vet is happy with the document, doesn't matter who creates it.
Receiving vet is happy with it. That's the key words, right? Frank is asking, when will the model health certificates, the real final certificates, be uploaded and updated onto traces? Because we must not forget that these traces... I
can't answer that question.
Yeah, no, I know. These EHCs need to be translated into 24 or 22 or whatever languages as well. So we won't ask you that. We'll move swiftly along, but I promised Frank I'd ask that question. Given that DG Sant is not participating, regrettably, I'm afraid, Frank, we don't have an answer for that. Thank you, Peter. Much appreciated. And if you can pop that link into the chat, it would be great. All right, great. Moving right along. Now we are a little bit behind, but that's okay, I think, because Max has promised that he's going to be really succinct. But it is a fascinating story that you're not going to hear very often. We're talking about imports of meat products, fish products, dairy products, cheese products, whatever you wish, into the UK. But there is a different world out there, and that's for those that transit through the UK. UK as a land bridge, UK, you know, to France to Ireland, for example, is one that does happen. Ireland to the continent is another one. And then there is the specific case of ship supply. And ship supply is really interesting because we've got all these cruise ships calling Southampton every other day in summertime for sure. And these cruise ships are like cities. You've got thousands of people on them, and they all want to eat, and they all want the captain's dinner, and they all want to go shopping, and they all want this and that and this, and ideally do duty free and whatnot. but the cruise ship sails off the UK coast after having called a UK port. So we are then in a situation where Max Gerards, who's a member of the board of the Dutch Ship Suppliers Association, has to move his products from a warehouse in the Netherlands onto a vessel calling in Southampton. Now, Southampton cruise ship calls maybe an hour, maybe a day, not an hour, a day, and then leaves again. So how is Max going to get his stuff to the cruise ship calling Southampton port? And what's the role of freight agents and freight forwarders? And what concern does Stuart Green have, who's the regulatory affairs manager of Southampton Freight Services? So these guys have put themselves together, and they're going to give you a presentation on what we're going to do transiting food through the UK after the 31st of January. We'll start with Max and then on to Stuart. So Max, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you, Arnie. I will start sharing my screen. Looks like this one. Hopefully it's visible and it works for everybody. And then I put it on slide presentation, slideshow. Does it work? Yep. So
just give it a moment. It's nice and it hasn't shown yet, but it will hopefully in a moment.
And otherwise they are in your mailbox, Arnie. Yeah. I sent them at 2 o'clock.
I'll go get them. I'll go get them.
Go get them.
You can get started.
In the meantime, I will end the presentation then. Where is my end slideshow? And then go. I'll go to Zoom. Back to Zoom.
Just get going. We are
okay.
we're seeing your teams now, so maybe you don't want to share us your teams right now. So better go back to the slides, and then I'm gonna open the
Better go back to the slides. This. Okay.
All right, let's go. Awesome.
Okay, stop share. I don't represent the tonnage that Peter Hartwig was doing, and Peter is aiming for the local market. Our market is going in transit through UK, and I'll take you through the effects of the target operating model for mixed loads of medium risk classified products traveling in transit. For example, to a ship, could be a cruise ship, could be a cargo ship, could be a Navy ship. The next slide, please. Well, brief introduction. My name is Max Gerards. I'm based in Holland. I represent the Dutch Ship Supply Association as well as Ocean, the European Ship Supply Association. I work for the company B&S, and we are a big stockist of stocks needed on board of ships. Ship supply in transit means following. We go with from a customs warehouse with a mix of all conceivable foodstuffs, luxury items, spare parts to a ship in a seaport. It's characterized as a sealed truck or container load. It is equated with export because it won't touch the local market, and it's treated as such by the customs. It travels under NCTS and is receiving a confirmation of exit when the goods go on board of the ship. So the products are meant to be consumed on board of the ship. Well, as per the 31st of Jan, we fall under paragraph 1.4, transit, and paragraph 2.33 says, we are going to introduce a simplified but effective system of biosecurity, and it refers to the section 1.3 for how getting your documents. And it says it's a simplified system, it's in force, and the various meat, fish, lamb, poultry, raw dairy, milk products have to be certified. So, okay, I go to the Dutch competent authority on the next slide. And the first, for example, for beef, they say you need to register yourself for the GB, the Great Britain Protocol. Well, it is written on the Dutch page, it's visible for everybody. And if you are a normal exporter, a normal slaughterhouse, experienced with food and certified BRC, IFS, ISO 22000, whatever, food safety, this is really doable for any self-respecting export company. So that's a tick of the box. Okay. Then we come to the next step. On the Dutch website is written, instruction RL246 with 15 pages of instructions how to get your beef certificate. And on these 15 pages is a lot which has to be confirmed. Opposite-wise, EU requires the same from England, I know. But a lot has been required to certify and to prove to your local vet. And that pile of proof might be a pain in the arse. And on the right-hand side, you see the word pre-export certificate. It's what we just discussed with Peter as well. If certain points have to be proved, let's say raw milk coming from Bulgaria or whatever, the areas where a sickness might have been or is still in force, then you need a pre-certificate from that area to get your Dutch certificate. The thing is that if your stock is already in the Netherlands in a warehouse and you want to sell a part of it to UK, then you're too late with your pre-certificate. It should come along with the goods from origin to Holland, and then you can do the next step. Well, this is quite a challenge. I said this is not doable. It's really a burden. For a slaughterhouse, they can certify whatever you want, but for a stockist or a wholesaler, it's a challenge. Next slide, please. Then about the costs. Well, in Holland, every country has its different rates, but in Holland it works out as follows. First, you pay the call-out charges for the vet to come, which is 164 euros. Then every 15 minutes of work, you pay 53 euros. They will only come for at least 1 hour or longer. So if you have 10 different beef items to be certified in your mixed load, it's about 216 euros. You use the e-certification module, you pay fees. And if you say, well, give me a blank print to accompany the goods, you pay 62 euros per certificate. Mind you, beef, lamb, pork, and poultry can be certified by one and the same officer, but for fish, we need a specialist, and for dairy as well. So if you have one mixed truckload with the shopping cart of a ship, which is always a mix of many different items, sometimes up to 100, you need 3 inspectors paying 3 times the call-out charges of 164 euros. Next slide, please. So the lead time, which is important as well. Dairy inspection works a bit slow in the Netherlands. They work with 3 days pre-advice in order to decide whether the officer really needs to come or can do his work from a distance. Prior to lodging the application, you need to assemble all your product information because you have to prove every point what has to be certified in the certificate, and so you have to check it. You do your pre-search if necessary. You assemble the establishment numbers where you got the product from. That is standard. The best before dates, the lot codes, etc. And you have to add up all the net weights because that's really important. People only pay for the net received amount of cheese or beef or fish, whatever. So then you lodge your application and the clock starts ticking. Meat and fish work a bit quicker. They can do it within 24, 48 hours lead time. As soon as complete, you upload everything in iPaths, and they require several hours before you get the green light as well. Next slide, please. Then we go to BCP in Dover. I hope if I have 1 beef certificate, 1 fish certificate, 1 pork, and 1 dairy certificate, that the medium risk matrix will not say, okay, that is 4 times 30% chance. Well, for sure you're being selected, and for sure you have to open doors, because if we miss the boat at the agreed date and time of delivery, and like Arnie said, it's usually just 1 day in port, where can we go to? Because return to EU is required that your seal is still intact, that required health certificates are 100% correct and still available, that temperature and condition is maintained throughout the whole voyage, and they prefer a written non-manipulation certificate with a valid reason for refusal. And a commercial reason, like we just missed the boat, is open for discussion. And then, yeah, I cannot sell it locally to Peter Hartwig and his friends. I can only search and find a duty-free or an export destination out of the UK port, which is either the next boat in a month's time or return to the EU. So usually the transporter starts to complain, and and we head for destruction with great speed, unfortunately. So if I summarize the challenges for passing through in transit to a ship, we see a long lead time. We see very complex stipulations in the certificates agreed between UK and DG Sante. High costs, 600 to 900 euros per mixed truck, I estimate. Ships can and do not wait. They pay huge port charges, and the passengers go off. And after one day in the city, they want to sail off for the next city. So any hiccups is a potential fatal for me. The risk of non-clearance or confirmation in NCTS, we always have to chase customs. And the return is a serious challenge. So after 4 years of discussion and meetings, and believe me, we have had many with working groups of DEFRA and customs, etc. It's our conclusion that it will be too risky to deliver a mixed truckload of foodstuffs to a ship in UK port. You should just tap the button once slightly. I inserted the small figure, and then we go for the next slide. And then tap once. The effect is that we expect that ship owners will finally decide to reroute the ships in order to make sure that they pass European ports as often as possible, and that they tend to avoid taking supplies in British ports because it's costly and it's risky. And then that's bad for the business, not for my business, but as well for UK business. A remedy I suggest is to really introduce a really simplified and effective system, like BTOM says, but then you need one simple health statement for the complete cargo, because goods are already freely available in the UK market, in the EU market, and are considered as sound and safe here. And they will not touch the local market in the UK, but will be consumed on board of a ship. Or to require not a certificate whatsoever and to pass it as a ship supply in transit code and checked for re-export by your local customs in the port. And that's what I had to say, and I'm still within the 9 minutes.
That's impressive. Thank you very much. And what an insightful presentation, with quite an easy conclusion, I must admit. And that's just the EU part, right? So that's just seeing what you guys have to go through if you're even going to try to consider coming to the UK.
Yeah, I do realize that opposite-wise, UK had to pass the same hiccups and challenges and when they want to export to EU. But yeah, opposite-wise, you see, it works out the same. And it is a really showstopper at this moment, as I see it.
And what I find very interesting is that, you know, you're coming from a different perspective than Peter. Peter is reporting challenges that need to be overcome. You've heard from Rod, who is having more questions than answers. And you, Max, have already concluded what you're gonna what's going to be the effect and what you're not going to do anymore in the future, and that's supply vessels calling UK ports. One of the persons that is situated in such port and will have listened very carefully to what Max had to say, and in fact these guys have been in conversations over the last month on what to do, is of course Stuart. And Stuart's going to take the floor in a moment and tell us a little bit about the UK side and the readiness that he feels his company has for the 31st of January. He represents, if I may, bluntly say so, and it might not be completely right, but hey, you know, you are the freight forwarder and the agent on the call here, and you will have to deal with the goods once they are ready, once the EHC, I guess, has been uploaded, and you are in one of the ports where Max is saying he's staying out of. So, Stuart, how do you receive this information from Max, and what's your take on the whole thing? The floor is yours.
Oh, well, hi everyone, I'm Stuart Green from Southampton Freight Services. So basically, I mean, I agree pretty much with everything Max was saying. So he's basically done everything for me pretty much. But what we do know, subsequent to what Max said, is that we've already got 2 cruise lines which have said that they're going to be cutting calls in Southampton for resupply. So there is obviously an effect on businesses in the UK when that happens. So what Max says is absolutely true. That's already happening. So what we've done on our side is that we've attended all the things with DEFRA and asked so many questions and so little answers until eventually this month they did a discussion about the cruise sector, which for us as a business is a very large part of what we deal with. But it is pretty similar to what other businesses do as well for anyone that's using the GB as a land bridge, which we all get sort of lumped obviously together. And this is obviously where, as Max was saying, that goods are moving in a sealed vehicle. So from our point of view, is the biosecurity risk that's been talked about earlier is minimal. But in addition to that, what Max was saying is that as of the end of last year, the Home Office in the UK brought in a seal check where we have to now photograph the seal before something gets delivered aboard a vessel. So in a sense, the seal checks that have been talked about within the BTOM, where they ask for 100% integrity of the seal checks on exit, they're already happening. So in a sense, what they're doing through the BTOM is sometimes a little bit duplications, and therefore bringing extra costs onto business that otherwise could be avoided. I will share my thing, but Max has covered lots of things, so there you go. But I mean, largely speaking, is for us, our main concerns will be on the IPAFs, because the fact is that we have to do a declaration per animal type, so you could have multiple declarations on one vehicle if you have a mixed load vehicle with lots of products on board. And because of the time limits when that must be sent in, that could be a real big problem. Even with the 4-hour window, it could be a real big problem because obviously if you're meeting a cruise ship, you have limited time. And also is the fact that the checks, for the seal checks, would mean potentially that the vehicle may have to go to one of the IBFs, and then there could be delaying time there. And above all else, there's the cost ramification. So we heard from Max on the costs on the EU side. Obviously, we have the costs that are coming on the UK side, but we still don't know what they are, which is a real big problem of how something can come in at the end of this month, yet albeit the checks don't come into the end of April, but to not know what they are, that puts a real difficulty for business. And that might be one of the reasons also, as well as the inability to get health certificates, why a couple of cruise lines have already decided not to resupply at UK ports this season. And we just hope at some point there'll be some easements from the UK government to make the whole system more effective, in which case it can actually happen in a controlled way rather than a chaotic way. That's all I've got really. So because obviously Max has already covered everything, so I don't want to repeat everything twice. But it's going to be a real challenge, and I think that the biggest problem will be is the fact that the cruise ships are, as Max said, it's a moving target, and if we miss the ship, we can't just it's not like arriving at a warehouse where you can just deliver a day late.
Understood. Well, look, thank you, Stuart. Just please unshare if you don't mind.
Yeah, indeed. I will work that out as soon as I can do it.
So we've got concerns on the EU side, and we've got concerns on the UK side. One is to do with getting the certs, the certificates all ready to go, and then once we've got the certificates, we're then facing all the challenges that we've talked about in terms of border control posts, charges, timings, and for just-in-time delivery of food products, of provisions. That's going to be a nightmare. Especially if you're unlucky to be in one of the 1 or the 30% that gets then pulled aside. Okay, fantastic. Well, look, thank you, Stuart. Thanks to your swiftness of walking through this, we are back on track, so to speak. So that's really good. Thank you so much. We're now moving to Tom James, so technical manager at BTOM Foods, and I had the pleasure to talk to Tom this week, previous weeks, many weeks now, about how they're getting ready for the new veterinary border controls. And what's special about Tom and about BTOM Foods is they're really a company that is in the middle of the whole thing, and it can give a live kind of update, a running commentary, so to speak, on where they are with the food preparations. We would expect on the veterinary border preparations, and where we would expect, of course, them to say, well, do you know what, we're all ready, we're good to go, because we've got 10 days to go. So I want to know what the technical manager of BTOM Foods says. Obviously, maybe presenting what the company does and how it affects how the SPS goods actually affect real UK business. So, Tom, if you want to have a go at telling us where you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. So I'll just share the presentation. One moment. Can you see that okay? Excellent. So yeah, I'm Tom James, technical manager at BTOM Foods. I've been given the task of understanding all the EHCs and trying to understand the law around it, which is obviously no easy task. So I'll start off with who we are. It's important to understand that. So we were established in 2002. We're a meat manufacturer, slicing and packing cooked meats for retail customers.
So just one thing, Tom, we're seeing 2 slides, right? So we're seeing the slide on the left, and then we're seeing the next slide already. So to know how you could, I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be, but I'm seeing already seeing the next slide. But
we might go with that, Arnie, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we might go with that. Yeah,
I haven't got the technical expertise. We'll go with that. That's fine.
All right.
You can click on the top left. It says display settings.
Oh yes.
And there you go. If you swap, yep, perfect.
Oh, that's much better. Thank you, Donna. Awesome.
Very much.
Teamwork. So here we go.
Absolutely. So a significant amount of our business is actually supplied for the purchase of residual trims. So what is residual trim? So it's ready to eat cooked meats. It's essentially offcuts, so log ends or stock surplus that we're actually getting from large meat manufacturers across Europe. So what this means essentially is you'll have large manufacturers producing customer orders, and they'll have leftovers or log ends that they can't sell to their main customers. We will then purchase that, bring it to the UK, and slice and pack it for our UK customers. Where this gives us challenges is instead of having a consignment of maybe 1 PLU, 1 batch of grade A ham, instead we're having lots and lots and lots of small batches, can be as small as 100 kilos, which make up a single consignment. So as you can imagine, your export health certificates are already difficult. When you've got this many batches, it almost becomes impossible. So we've had to work with our suppliers to understand the EHCs and how we can get around this. And I'm keen to share that with yourselves and propose solutions with a view to potentially collaborating. So the first thing we looked at was actually understanding the EU law that sits behind it and how that aligns. So the EHC obviously makes reference to law, and that law is actually the same as EU law. So what we're basically saying is the export health certificate that we're asking the Europeans to fill in actually matches the law that they follow by default for the most part. There may be minor differences, but where you've actually gone through the detail section by section, the law matches. So going back to the point that Peter Hardwick made, that they should already be doing these things by default. So the vets should have, they should be sure with the meat that's coming in anyway. Go on to the EHC. So in terms of how we went to address this, so we went through each section, checked the law that it goes against, and we compared that to European law. The idea being, is there any real difference? What we came down to is each section makes reference to GB law, which correlates to EU law. So we've used poultry as an example here. So not all the sections are relevant. So those highlighted in red are the ones that are related to importing poultry from the EU. And one section which we identified as a real problem is this AHP420. Go on to the next page. This is essentially what the clause is. So this clause is all about disease. So what we're basically saying is the raw material does not come from territories within a 10-kilometer radius of any outbreak of avian influenza or Newcastle disease for the last 30 days. So this is the section which is giving us real trouble with regards to our suppliers and regards to getting the EHC signed off. In terms of compliance, so a vet should be checking the regions which are visible on table 2. So if we use Germany as an example, we can see all the regions which are disease-free and any restrictions that are there. So the vet essentially would have loads that they need to sign off, and they would check on the website to see what regions are restricted and what regions aren't restricted. What we're being told by the German vets is they need pre-certs. So for every supply of cooked cooked chicken that comes through, they need a pre-certificate to essentially say that it's not come from a diseased area. So what we're proposing is potentially creating a pool or a list of approved slaughterhouses cutting plants in the form of a supplier attestation, similar to what Peter was mentioning earlier on. This would show all the holding locations. So the idea here being that the vet can check off the pool of raw materials being used against diseased areas. If we could get this list signed off by a vet to say, yeah, all of that pool of raw material is not from a diseased area, and we stayed abreast of any new disease outbreaks, and if there were any holdings which were within that 10-kilometer radius, they would be removed from the supply. That's essentially an angle we're looking to go down in terms of signing off EHCs as opposed to pre-certs. So if we go back to our business in terms of 100 kilo batches, it wouldn't work. The number of pre-certs we would need, the vet would be inundated with trying to trace every single batch. It wouldn't be achievable. Whereas if we talk about one pool of raw materials, suddenly one document can essentially sign off all of those batches, provided we keep it up to date and provided that list is periodically signed off by a vet. That's what we're looking to put forward with the German vets, and that's how we're looking to get the goods to continue after January the 31st. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Oh, that was a technical presentation. Thank you very much, Tom. That's great. But let us, because it was quite technical, let us quickly distill this a little bit, because it goes into the heart of what the challenges that we're facing. I'm so grateful that you took the time to share your analysis with us, and you actually opened an EHC and actually went into the part that businesses shouldn't even be looking at, because we're only dealing with part 1. And the vet's supposed to sort out part 2. So how is it that you are looking into part 2? Tell us a little bit. What's happening when you are in these conversations? Why are the vets telling you they need these these pre-certs so much?
The troubles we're getting, initially, it seemed to be that the vets didn't have adequate training on the EHC, so they didn't actually know what they were being asked to sign off against. So this is where I made the point earlier on in the presentation that GB law actually equals EU law. There might be minor amendments that were made post-Brexit, but essentially it's the same. If you take out the specific snippet that relates to the EHC, they remain the same. The reason vets are looking for pre-certs is that gives them full trust that yes, it meets the GB regs. And that seems to be the line they're taking at the moment. And what we need is a German vet to actually sit down and have a conversation with and understand what they would need to get sign off. So what I've proposed there, that's just an idea, but we're happy to obviously work with German vets and try and find some that will work.
Peter, I've seen you want to come on. Just let me finish this point, if I may. With
yeah, it's on the same thing, and I know quite a bit about this. So
right, let me just ask one more question, and then I'll bring you back in. Tom, so okay, so I'm blurry. I don't know why. The VAT's not willing to sign this at the moment. Say because of the pre-certs that are so desperately needed. What's going to happen? What's going to happen if these pre-certs are not going to get signed?
If they don't get signed, we can't complete the EHC, or we need to submit the EHCs with that section struck out.
So does that mean we need to cross through parts that are required?
It does, absolutely. So we would cross through that clause I showed on screen, so AP 420, which then puts us at risk in terms of supply coming in, because if they were checking the EHC 100%, they would see that we haven't actually completed that section.
Okay, that's a little concerning, isn't it? Peter, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I do, yes, because Tom, you know, we encountered this problem, and through one of our European trade associations, Clitravi, you may know of, they're the processed meat association, effectively, in Brussels. We approached, and I'm going to name names now because people might as well hear it. We approached Koen van Dijk, who is the senior person responsible within the European Commission for this issue, and those are his words that I put on the chat, right? So if member states are having problems here, they really do need to get the senior people in their competent authority to contact Brussels and get direct guidance, because the direct guidance is clear. I've been in the chat at the moment about the law, right? It is absolutely the case, because the UK decided to leave the European Union, that UK law is now separate from European law, which is why we are faced with the nonsense in both directions of having to complete export health certificates in the full knowledge that in both cases our countries meet the other countries' requirements, in both directions, by the way, because although the European Union's animal health regulations have changed, they haven't changed substantially, and as it happens, the UK businesses have to meet them anyway. So, and it's certainly the case that post the new animal health regulations, which are stricter than the current UK regulations, which do not follow them directly, it is absolutely the case that if you meet EU requirements, that's what Koen van Dijk has said, you meet UK requirements until we hear otherwise. Now, of course, if the UK decides at some point to make some dramatic change to its animal health regulations, we're in new territory. That hasn't happened yet. If anything, the UK is falling further and further behind EU regulations at the moment. That's what's actually happening. Now, if you can't get pre-certificates, and I put the information in the chat as to how to create them, they aren't difficult to create them. But really what needs to happen is in every single case here, you either need to write to or pick up the phone to a senior people in Brussels. I can see someone doesn't listen to the Commission. Well, God help us. What sort of community is it? But that's the bottom line. So if you're not, then you have to create pre-certificates. They're not that difficult to create, but really the vets have to help you a bit here. They have to say, well, what do you want on the pre-certificate? Do you just want us to say these meet EU rules or they meet UK rules? I don't know. I mean, but the reality is that the Commission has been very clear about this. You do not need pre-certificates. And I have to say, not every single member state is struggling with this problem. Germany seems to be.
Tom, what is your experience on what you've just heard? Why is it so difficult? Peter says it's not.
It shouldn't be. I mean, the reality is, if people aren't going to listen to senior officials in Brussels, then I think you have to question what the hell is going on. But that's the reality of it. He made that statement very, very clearly to deal with this question of pre-certificates. That was a specific question that was asked. Do we need pre-certificates? And the answer came back, you do not. Because by definition, goods arriving at your site from another member state must have, if it was released from the site, must have met EU rules. It must have. Otherwise, it could not have left that site. Okay, unless there's something seriously gone wrong. And the same thing goes for it has exactly the same status as the product already at that site. It has the same status by law. So I really don't quite get why we're struggling with this. It is absolute nonsense.
We're going to give the final word to Tom to respond to that, and then we have to move on regrettably. But thank you very much, Peter, for this. I do want to just point out one thing before I give the final words to Tom, is that we have a very interesting chat here, and we seem to be confirming that I'm going to quote here: German vets do not listen to the EU Commission. They need confirmation from German Ministry not to need pre-certs. And I don't want to start with you again, Peter, because I know we could talk about it for a long time. You've made your point very clear, but believe you me, I have myself worked over the last 6 months on that same issue. And it has to do, as Karen says, with the fact that Germany is a federal state. And that word federal actually is really, really important, because it means that the person that decides whatever goes is the local VAT. So the responsibility for ensuring that the consignment is free of animal diseases is the local VAT. And contrary to the UK, and I may just throw this in, we have a situation where we have a representative of a country certifying in the name of the Federal Republic of Germany that this consignment is safe. And that might be different from the situation in the UK, where we have private vet attestations as well. Now, I know we could talk long about this, but Tom, tell us, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I don't know what we need, but something needs to be given to the member state Germany to get them to sign off. I agree with you, Peter. It does seem to be more Germany than any other member state, but we need to understand why that is. And if they won't sign off, there's a lot of supply that ultimately won't come into the UK.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you, Tom, very much for your contribution. That was very insightful and quite concerning. And that brings me to our final speaker today. Time's moving rapidly, advancing rapidly. Last but not least, certainly not least, her name was mentioned several times, and she is one of the key persons in the UK to talk about SPS certification, because she is the chair of the working group on SPS certification. So all of these details that we've just heard from Tom about EHCs and the challenge of having them signed off in the EU can now be looked at again at a holistic stage, moving away a little bit maybe from the meats, by Karen Goodburn. And she will have the final say for this conference about where we are and where we need to be. And Karen, I've heard so many challenges now. Can you sign us off on a good positive note to say, yes, we are ready to go and it's all going to be fine? Can everybody just chill? See what I did there?
Oh, nice one. I wish, yeah, I really wish, and especially as the clock's ticking so rapidly at the moment. All I can say is that we've brought together the SPS certification working group probably about 3 years ago, but of course we've all been working on this for more than 7.5 years now, and we're still in the situation that we're in. So what we've done is bring together about 29 organisations, including the Chilled Food Association, which is really my sort of day job, as it were. And we are seeking to minimise trade friction in SPS products between GB and EU/Northern Ireland. So I'll tell you what we're doing, what we want, and what the issues are. It's pretty much a roundup of stuff, but we're dealing with quite high level in parts of government and weekly meetings with the people who are actually doing the work, the civil servants who are actually doing the work. I mean, the politics in here needs to change. That's the fundamental issue. So what we are seeking, as it says on the bottom of the slide, first slide, is we want to minimise trade friction. That's both ways, because we need to import so much of our food from the EU and EFTA. And protect sustainability, because food waste is not going to help anybody in this. It's a disgrace to end up with food waste because of politics. We want to protect food safety and animal health, of course, secure jobs, that's both sides of the channel and the RSC, and assure food security as well, which is really being threatened, I believe, by all the issues we've heard about earlier today. So the SPS Certification Working Group, there are 29 organisations which are members. There's no fee. We get together every Thursday morning. I manage it together with my colleague Charlotte, who's on the call as well, and many members are also on the call. So we've got the entire food chain, really, the BRCs in here, all the way back to the NFU and the Agricultural Industries Confederation, and all the people actually making food and fresh produce, meat, fish, dairy, fruit, veg, and supplements, and so on, and road haulage is in here too. So it's a very widespread, and when we toss it up, it's well over £100 billion worth of business that our organisations represent. That's talking through the SPS Certification Working Group, as I say, very regularly. So what do we want? Minimise friction. This is like a chunk. What do we want? Minimise trade friction in SPS products. We want to protect sustainability, protect food safety, animal health, protect food security, and secure FBO and distribution jobs. And we can only make food if we have the raw materials. That's the first thing. I mean, before we even get to exporting, if you can't make it, it's not going to go anywhere, is it? And we're going to end up with a real situation which will compound food price inflation that is happening in the UK, if not elsewhere. Certainly in my sector, in chill prepared foods, we have not exported any significant volumes whatsoever across the channel since the end of the transition period. Stop. The foods that I deal with are chilled prepared, so it's all the further prepared, not necessarily ready to eat, pizza, pasta, soup, sauces, dips, dressings, sandwiches, salads, desserts, ready meals, etc. So that is sold under retailer own label in the UK primarily. I'd say 99% of it, and the retailers are not. They're not taking from the UK to have it subjected to all the EHCs and the rest of it to get it over in relatively small volumes. We also make food by hand largely, so we cannot mess around with this. Cannot. And in fact, I've been told by the Belgian Chill Food Association they're not going to bother with the UK because of BTOM. It's just too much fuss and cost. Anyway, that wasn't positive either, was it? So what we want to do is remove archaic bureaucracy, reducing time spent to actually shift goods, and reducing error and costs. So there's talk about e-certification and so on, and seem to be ended up with a PDF at the moment. We want to review requirements for inspection and certification. Again, all this stuff, because we haven't really diverted from EU rules. It hasn't happened. So we're still working to the same stuff, and somehow it needs to be recognised. And what we really want is a form of a mutual veterinary and plant agreement, an SPS agreement with the EU to ease the problems in food and feed trade. So there's some various other sub points there. The whole thing, the assumption is that we are somehow not complying with EU legislation. And for me, working in food safety and hygiene in particular, it's particularly galling because the UK led on a lot of EU policy of food hygiene and safety for the last 30 years. So we set the stuff up, and now we're being asked to prove that you comply with it. Never mind. So we want to improve systems. Well, this is the paperwork. I've got a little bit just popped up here on the right-hand side of my screen. December 21 to 23, compared with December 20. December 20 was the first month when FBOs in the UK started getting in EHCs because they wanted to be sure that goods were shipped from January, which is transition period, end of the Brexit transition period, when things really started to come into the EU. So we've got a reduction in the last 3 years compared with that first month of 10% in the number of EHCs that have been issued. I'll unveil the rest of it shortly, but so Peter has referred to the cost of certification to prove we still comply with EU law, and we're still going to inflict that on the EU, which, considering we're not self-sufficient in foods, could be very significant. We've got already under-resourced certifiers in GB. The OVs, we've been dealing with avian influenza pretty persistently since all this kicked off. It just happens. And there's still the threat of ASF and the rest of it. And EHOs are commenting, some of them publicly, saying they haven't got enough time to actually inspect food businesses because of they do fish and composite products certification. We have a 24/7, should be 365 service. That might be a subliminal thing, that 365 service for OVs, because they're private. They're private in the UK. So if you could pay for it, you can get an OV to turn up, depending where you are. And that does not exist in the EU and EFTA. They are all civil servants who tend to go home at certain times and not be there at the weekend. So, we've got this massive on cost now if you want to try and shift product across the sea. Any bit of water, really. There are separate rules for Northern Ireland, which we won't go into here, which are a separate burden. So, what we're talking about, excuse me. So this is Animal Plant and Health Agency, that's government, UK government data for GB EU EHCs, excluding the non-food stuff. So what I've done here, if I can find the pointer, is take 2020, so all these months were just pre-Brexit and then get ready for Brexit in December. So 20,309 EHCs were issued for GB EU in December alone, 2020, and that's out of the total of 22,990 in the whole year. So it's a huge leap. I mean, it's a huge leap in EHCs. And when you look at the last 3 years, because we get data in every month from APHA through a Freedom of Information request that one of the members of the certification working group puts in. And so I worked out the mean EHCs per month over the period of time that we've had to have them to export to the EU. And bearing in mind that chill food is not amongst this, my chill prepared stuff, because we can't afford this. We can't afford to lose time with a 7-day shelf life. So on average, over the last 3 years, there's been over 250,000, 276,000 EHCs used to get to the EU from GB. I haven't put in the December thing but I have put that little blob on the right, because the figures for December 2021 to 3 show a 10% decrease. So is that companies just giving up or getting smarter about how they group things together? I can't really say. And the percentage changes is just phenomenal. 16,500 % change versus before. So that's a huge, it's a vast increase in bureaucracy. When you add up the total number of EHCs over the last 3 years, there's 3 complete years, then you get to 852,165. And we've agreed between us in these SPS Cert working group that each one may take up to 2 hours to do. And when you multiply that by that and you divide by the number of days, you end up with 842 certified years have been spent completing EHCs in the last 3 years. And what a waste of time that is. And these are people who have got degrees in veterinary science and environmental health. And it's frankly a nonsense. They need to change. Something needs to be done. So what this means to GB FBOs at a cost of 200 quid each of these EHCs, what we estimate overall across the whole industry we deal with, is about £170 million actual expenditure from GB FBOs to get OVs and EHOs, well, mainly OVs because they're private, to sign off and deal with EHCs. And if you're talking about 2% profit, which is quite common in the food industry, then 50 times that is the amount of food you need to sell to generate the profit to pay for it. So that's equivalent to having to have raised £8.5 billion worth of extra sales to cover these new costs. And of course, that hasn't happened. The opposite has happened. And this is just the certification costs. It doesn't include what's going on with Northern Ireland requirements, because this is just EU, GB EU. A lot of FBOs have had to recruit new staff in admin systems, with training. There's support health attestations, which are applied to other bits. And there's the time waiting and the loss of goods to waste if there's delay, because with short shelf life products and so on. And many food producers, particularly in my business, my industry, they may be supplying a major retailer with their own label in the Republic, but they don't know whether that lasagna they're making is going to stay in GB or go to Northern Ireland or go to the Republic when they make it. So they just get certification just in case so it can travel. Huge amount of extra burden, and it's just not really talked about in public by the government. So that's one whole chunk of stuff. That's the financial impact of EHC requirements. EU situation. I mentioned the Belgian industry advising me that, and they're also advising, well, different member state suppliers are advising GB companies that they haven't got the EHCs yet in their own language. And of course, that's the DEFRA, and the government has no power to compel the Italians to translate things now, but it could be slightly difficult on the Italian charcuterie front, to put it that way. There's also various issues which I hope will be solved next week, I understand, on poultry meat coming in from the continent in relation to AI zoning. That's what I'll say on that one. EU OV availability, as I said, just not there. I had an example from Ireland, 7 AM to 7 PM, Monday, Friday. Might be there up to 10 PM sometimes, and a bit on Saturday mornings perhaps. And certainly I'm aware of one business that said we source a lot of our protein, as many do, from Ireland in GB, and they may have to shut their factory 2 days a week because there won't be enough stuff to process. So that means jobs, economy, local and national, and food security issues. Another hidden little thing, low risk materials won't need to come in with an EHC, but if you're going to put that into something that becomes a medium risk or perhaps higher risk, you're going to need an EHC to send it to the EU, from whence the original raw material came before you did things to it. The thing is, you don't have the data to fill in an EHC because of the low risk material stuff, which doesn't need any of that information to come here. DEFRA has issued guidance, but it just says get them to do an EHC. Well, as if you could force somebody to do an EHC on a product that doesn't need it at cost themselves and getting an OV in. So we need greater flexibility in that sort of guidance there, and specificity about what information is required, and acceptance by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons that is enough to sign off an EHC. I mentioned the Belgians, and other stuff is happening as well. It's just too much for companies to deal with, all this cost and complexity and the potential for just loss of product. There's a major difference in composite rules for GB, EU and EU GB, because we're working to the old stuff before the AHR. It's very confusing, and there's a DEFRA leaflet and decision tree on it, which has raised further questions from our European Federation to me, which frankly don't have answers at the moment. So what we need, a UK government webpage summarising where to get the EU GB EHCs, that's so listings for member states' websites, so that importers, UK food businesses, can advise the suppliers where to get the stuff from. We need that. We need something, and there's nothing there. We need clarity on the common user charge, which is the BCP charge, can be between £10 to £43, depending on low and other risk. We've got a big problem here because not many people seem to realise that the definition of consignment for these CUC, which is customs, etc. related, it's different. The customs stuff is different from the SPS definition of consignment. So an SPS definition of consignment is something travelling under one EHC. For customs, is something that's of the same commodity code. So we could get a whole load of different things that will be under one EHC, because they're quite broadly grouped at times. But you would have this charge per consignment as per the commodity code. So beware of that. Also, we haven't had the response from the Cabinet Office on the Common User Charge, what it's actually going to be, and whether they've dealt with this difference between consignment. Of course, government wants to get some money in and pay for various things that have been put in place or not. We need clarity on the EU rest of world categorisation basis done by DEFRA and the FSA. And I think Peter raised this one. We don't know what the data is that they've used. And of course, the agreement with the EU is that every member state should be counted as the same. And really, they're not. In terms of food safety, animal health, it really differs across the EU. Maybe the same law, but there may be an outbreak here or there, or certainly, or contamination of some food material because of the weather in one part, and that might be a common event this time of year, etc. So the whole thing is just mulched together and lumped into risk categories, and we don't know what the basis is. And there's no particular means for the industry, which is dealing with real-time information, to actually tell the government that things have changed and need to shift the risk category either up or down. And the last FSA board meeting, they agreed that the executive management team of the FSA should be taking these decisions. And we still don't know on what basis. And all I can say, and I have said, is that when I've done work for the FSA, you have to set out what the basis of your decisions are. And here we got something that massively affects trade, and it's opaque. We need clarity on GB intensified official controls. So these are the sampling regime that comes into place when a vehicle has been stopped and something's been found not to be right. It's been tested or looked at in some way. And this is really difficult where you got a mixed load, because the driver, the haulier, the exporter or the importer, the experience on the continent is they're told nothing about what the issue is, what particular product or consignment it is that has an issue. And what happens with the IOC when it's brought in is, like, you find a problem, there's the next truck with that company or whatever is going to be subject to even more sampling and subsequent loads. And you still are not told what's wrong. And if you're not told what's wrong, how do you sort it out? So I've been in touch with DEFRA and the FSA on this, because they're drafting a protocol on this. Because if we can see there are problems on the continent, let's not do that to ourselves with incoming. Let's just have clarity of communication so everybody knows what the issue is and can resolve it instead of looting product, especially short shelf life. Unfortunately, absolutely no acknowledgement even from DEFRA to request to take this into account and engage. And I'm talking not like a week, but a couple of months. We need to have a negotiated solution to the ban on triangular trade, because the legal basis for it is, shall we say, unclear. And the EU just says, no, you cannot take something from the EU. They cannot take a Parma ham, whole leg of Parma ham, slice it in the UK and send it to Ireland or the EU, rest of it. You can't. Just cannot. But why? I mean, it's part of the, I was going to say third world, but rest of the world's rules. But it's not written down anywhere. And so that's still going round and round and round. And DEFRA has tried 3 times that I think I know of to raise this under the Trade Cooperation Committee, which is supposed to cooperate and deal with trade and is doing neither. We need an EHC easement for food samples. That's GB to EU, because you need to get an EHC if you need to send something over. And we need to send food over, or we have needed to, when you could, to Germany, for example, because we haven't got the lab facilities here. So how on earth we can deal with testing stuff that comes into UK when we haven't got lab capacity to do it, even for the stuff that we want to do for ourselves? I don't know. So we need to get some sort of easement there. And how are we going to actually test stuff? That's unclear. It's recognised by the FSA for chemistry labs, but micro is the issue as well. There's too much consolidation in the sector, and the actual variety of provision of service is gone. We need a clear legal basis and a published impact assessment, and not for EU labelling GB wide from this year, because that's not in the Windsor framework. And there is activity. So we've got the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons has sort of picked this up a bit and said, I can't see any basis for this. And there is no legal basis. So if you are labelling already not for EU and GB only product, or if you decide not to come October at the moment, because there's no law, nobody can enforce anything. So it's just extra cost. And it's also causing a lot of consumer confusion and dissent and belief that we're no longer comply with EU rules. It's not good enough for the EU. We've been seeking glossary of terms in relation to SPS trade and all of this stuff. I think it's over 3 years now. We actually drafted it, came back from DEFRA, a lesser beast than it was when we sent it there, and it sort of hasn't progressed at all, because the things like consignment and processing both differ. I've already mentioned consignment processing. It could be something to do with commodity codes and tariffs and stuff like that, or SPS. It differs. Let's have it set down when what applies and other terms. Of course, a lot of things have come and gone in the story of Brexit, and things that have been thought about, like digital assistance scheme was a big thing, and that seems to be e-certification, but that's a PDF now. And then nobody knows quite what the single trade window is either. So having things defined would be helpful, because then we would get fewer questions about what's this mean, hopefully, and actually saying what piece of law it came from. Also, good luck with getting the FAQs or Q&As done with this one, aren't they? Because there's utter failure from UK government to provide any consolidated FAQs. And even when associations, for example, are raising a common question in webinars, the DEFRA has gone back to them individually and not shared the response across the board. So all working in isolation, except we're sharing it through the SPS working group. We need better SPS TCA committee cooperation, because it says you're supposed to facilitate trade solutions, and that includes notifying EU EHC changes. I think there's some agreement now on scheduling of GB notification to EU, but really can't see much cooperation, and there's not any trade going on. And then we've got the potential for divergence. There's things in pesticide residues I'm aware of, and that will be accumulating effects on GB ability to trade. So what we need to cut through all of this, or, you know, if you want a positive thing, an SPS agreement that would cut through all of that would be fantastic. So we certainly need some sort of agreement, whether it's alignment or equivalence is another matter. Alignment would mean accepting EU rules, but of course they moved on a bit and we haven't had a say, and we will not have a say because we're not around the EU table. Or equivalence won't get rid of all the EHC requirements, be like New Zealand type thing. Perhaps something a mix and match Swiss type thing might go, but something needs to happen, because the EU is going to start feeling the pain and we're going to suffer, because 40% of our food is imported and a hell of a lot of that comes from EU. So that's it really. There's a whole load of other issues, but positive note, we need an SPS agreement. How's that for you, Arne?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Just stop sharing if you don't mind. Look, I did not expect, honestly, Karen, that you're going to do this, because my God, my head is spinning. It's so insightful. Thank you so much. I mean, there I thought we're dealing with the pre-certs, and then you open all this to the world. My goodness, that is. Thank you very much for your time and effort to put all of this together. Yeah, it is clear that if I say it nicely, the word readiness, and then I put a question mark next to it. Karen, thank you very much for your insights there. I'm aware of time, so I'm just going to draw this to a conclusion. And I have been listening very, very carefully. And please allow me to share my thoughts with you very, very quickly, given the time has advanced. So we have spent 3 hours together, and how has the time flown by? We have heard so many stories, so many thoughts, so many ideas, from Beverly telling us why biosecurity matters, to Ashford, to the ports. We've heard from operators, importers, exporters, freight forwarders. We've heard problems on the EU side with EHCs. We've heard, and we've heard on the UK side that there are lots of questions remaining. So what am I drawing from all of this? If I pull it all together, what can I say? Well, look, we started off asking the question, are we ready for the biggest change in SPS controls and the new veterinary border from 31st of January 2024, knowing that this is going to impact and go on for the whole of the year almost. And I think it's fair to say that the EU and the UK businesses, associations and authorities express their appreciation and support for measures aimed at enhancing biosecurity of the UK and reducing biohazard associated with imports. I also think, as we're talking about positives here, because it's not all negative, the incoming SPS rules and requirements of the BTOM are broadly clear and understood. Now, I might see some people jumping up and down, but overall, we know what the high risk, medium risk, and low risk kind of is, and we know what kind of controls are likely to happen with clarity on the timings and what's going to come in when, broadly. If you draw up the positives, I'd say UK businesses, associations, and authorities appreciate DEFRA's communication campaign and explain the new rules to affected stakeholders. What I mean by that is I hear the concerns about engagements and about answering questions to individual people, but we do need to recognize that they have thought about communicating the key messages through webinars, and they'll have a readiness meeting every Tuesday where everybody who wants to join is invited. I'm not saying it's in any way, shape, or form perfect, but I'm saying it is there, and there are efforts made by the government to communicate the rules. And if we find positives in the whole thing, then I should think we should also thank the government for their proposed simplifications and digitalization efforts under the BTOM. There are efforts to simplify and digitalize. Whether that goes far enough is a different matter, but the word digitalization, groupage, and trusted trader schemes is evident, and it is a clear goal of the government to simplify and make it easier to trade. And then I guess it is also fair to say, if we give this a positive spin, that we appreciate any additional initiatives aimed at reducing bureaucracy, red burden, and or red tape and administrative burden. I think that's a fair thing to say. And we also would stress, I hear from everybody speaking, that such efforts, notably reducing administrative burden, red tape, and bureaucracy, are crucial in promoting growth for the UK, growth for the EU, ensuring the smooth functioning of the EU-UK food supply chain, and preventing further food inflation in the UK and the EU, which many of you have mentioned as a concern. If I do take this to the next level, then after the positives, there are the challenges, and the challenges would say, if I got this right, there are ongoing concerns about the potential impact of incoming SPS controls on the smooth flow of EU-UK food trade. And this could potentially lead to undesirable consequences, particularly in terms of trade friction, supply, and availability of food in the UK, food prices, UK inflation, and job security. And then there are concerns about the ability of businesses and authorities to effectively handle the large volumes of export health certificate needed from 31st of January 2024. I'm aware that each of these sentences has a lot of meaning, and there's a lot we can be said about this. But if we draw it down to the main conclusions, I'd say that that's a fair conclusion. One of the key challenges we've identified in this conference is that despite the UK not requiring them, and the EU being considered a sanitary and phytosanitary SPS zone, some authorities in EU member states, and you know who you are, still refuse to sign off on EHCs without so-called pre-certificates from other EU vets. And we have heard quite clearly today that this results in expenses that burden businesses and pose significant threat to the smooth operation of supply chain. If you want to sum it up in one sentence, no pre-certifications are required. And some businesses, and that's really a red flag here, have raised concerns about the feasibility of trading with the UK due to incoming controls, as the costs seem to outweigh the benefits. So you've heard it at this conference, you've had speakers on this. They've said, and it's not just one speaker, it's been Karen, it's been Max, it's been Stuart. This means the UK is closed for us. And that, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is a red flag. And that is despite the introduction of so-called simplifications. I fear that the UK's competitiveness will be affected by EU businesses staying away. So We're ready? Well, turning to the UK, we must say that the operational procedure and staffing arrangements for border control posts remain, partly at least, unclear, which raises concerns about potential disruptions of trade flows once you're in the UK. And despite the approaching deadline for the new SPS laws, there are still numerous unanswered questions that businesses, associations, and authorities have. Ladies and gentlemen, we've made it. 3 hours ago, we started in the bit. We started to talk about SPS veterinary controls, and now we have heard from a wide range of speakers in the EU, in the UK, from businesses, from trade associations, and from governments itself. The only thing that remains for me to say is these slides, this presentation, this recording, and everything surrounding that will be made available, and you can look at the whole thing again as soon as it is updated. I would like to thank you very much. I'm aware of I'm quite blurry here, for joining me. It would appreciate it if you could leave some feedback on how you like the conference and what you think could be better, what could be improved, what needs to be looked at, but also what went really well. And I hope you have taken a lot of value from this. If you are affected by the SPS controls on the 31st of January, the only thing that remains me to say right now is I wish you luck and a good, smooth ride over to the other side. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I wish you the best. See you next time.